I'm going to talk to you about how tipped employees should be paid. So first, let's talk about what a tipped employee is. So a tipped employee is someone that receives $30 or more a month in tip and usually works in a restaurant or a bar or a position where they interact with customers and they are tipped by the customers for their good service. So examples are servers, bartenders, counter personnel, bellhops. Those are type of people that provide good service in return for good tips. Now let's talk a little bit about how tips work. First, every tipped employee by law has to be paid the minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. You can pay a tipped employee in two ways. One is you can pay them uh, by the hour, at least $7.25 an hour. But whatever you pay the tipped employee on an hourly rate, that is called a cash wage. We'll get to that in a little bit. So you have to pay them under option one an hourly rate of at least $7.25 an hour or more. Option two, which is really common with restaurants and bars and some hotels for bar hops and valets, is you pay them a sub minimum wage. Basically, it's a fancy way of saying you paying them less than minimum wage. Usually, it has to be at least $2.13 an hour. You can't pay them any lower than $2.13 an hour. And then you hope that they are rewarded by customers for good service and tips that brings their hourly wage up to at least $7.25 an hour. Okay, so let's take the cash wage part. Whatever you pay them by the hour is $2.13 or more, and their tips that they receive has to bring their hourly wage up to $7.25 an hour. In order to do a tip, to pay tipped employees this way, well, we call it a tip credit. The law requires that you, number one, you pay them $2.13 an hour. Number two, you make sure that they make at least enough money in tips to bring their hourly wage up to $7.25 an hour each week. Number three, you have to have written notice. You have to provide notice to the employee that you're paying them in this way. The notice has to say, we're paying you, you're allowed to be paid at least $7.25 an hour. We can pay you as low as $2.13 an hour, and you get tips to bring it up to $7.25 an hour. The notice also has to say that if the employee does not make enough in tips per hour to bring it up to $7.25, the employer will contribute additional funds to bring them up to the minimum wage. Now, let's talk a little bit about the 213. Many restaurants and bars make a mistake. They pay them less than 213. You cannot allow tipped employees to work for free, no hourly wage, and work on tip alone. That's just illegal. Can't do that. Here's how you calculate if the employee is making at least $7.25 an hour. You take the total pay that they receive each week, which is 7 days, in cash tip. Let me say it, in their cash wage portion, the hourly wage, and their tips. You add it together, so the total pay for that week, you divide it by the hours they work that week. That gets you an hourly rate. That hourly rate has to be $7.25 an hour.